Ask anyone why Rome fell, and you'll hear the same answers. Invaders, corruption, bad rulers, all dramatic, all easy to picture. But Rome didn't disappear overnight, and it wasn't only defeated from the outside. Something inside the empire cracked long before the walls fell. The real collapse started quietly in the currency people trusted with their lives. Empires rarely die from a single blow. They decay. They weaken from the inside, and one of the fastest ways to rot an empire is to destroy trust in its currency. Rome didn't just lose wars, it lost faith in the very thing that held its economy together. And once that happened, everything else began to unravel. To understand how this happened, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a small silver coin that once carried the weight of an empire. For centuries, Rome's economic backbone was the denarius. First minted more than 200 years before Christ, it was made of nearly pure silver. Soldiers were paid in it, merchants demanded it, ordinary people saved it. The denarius wasn't just money, it was credibility. As long as Rome was strong, the coin was trusted, and as long as the coin was trusted, the empire functioned. But running an empire on that scale wasn't cheap. Armies had to be fed and paid. Roads, aqueducts, and cities had to be built and maintained. Borders stretched across 3 continents, and defending them required enormous resources. By the 2nd century after Christ, Rome was under constant pressure, from Germanic tribes in the north, Parthians in the east, and growing unrest from within. The cost kept rising, but tax revenues couldn't keep up, so Roman emperors reached for a solution that has tempted rulers throughout history. Instead of raising taxes, which risked rebellion, they quietly reduced the silver content of the denarius. The coin looked the same, it spent the same, but it wasn't the same. Under Emperor Augustus, at the height of Rome's power, the denarius contained about 95% silver. By the early 3rd century, under Emperor Caracalla, that figure had dropped to around 50%. A few decades later, during the reign of Gallienus, it fell below 5%. What was once a solid silver coin had become little more than bronze coated with a thin silver wash. People noticed. You can't fool an entire society forever. Coins felt lighter, they tarnished differently, merchants began testing them, and as trust slipped away, prices began to rise. Inflation wasn't a theory, it was lived reality. A measure of wheat that once cost a single denarius suddenly cost dozens. Savings lost value. Paychecks stopped stretching far enough. The damage rippled outward. Soldiers demanded higher wages just to survive. Merchants refused debased coins and turned to barter or demanded payment in gold. Local economies broke down as people stopped trusting money altogether. And instead of fixing the problem, emperors made it worse, minting more and more worthless coins, hoping quantity could replace value. It never does. This downward spiral reached its peak during what historians now call the crisis of the 3rd century. Between the years 235 and 284 after Christ, Rome plunged into nearly 5 decades of chaos. Emperors rose and fell at terrifying speed, some ruling for months before being assassinated. Civil wars raged, plagues spread, invasions intensified, and beneath all of it was a financial system that no longer worked. Taxes were still demanded, but they were collected in money that lost value by the day. Farmers abandoned their land rather than pay. Trade routes collapsed, markets emptied. The Roman government grew desperate, trying anything to keep the system alive. Price controls, forced labor, harsh penalties. None of it restored trust. One emperor, Diocletian, made a final dramatic attempt to stop the bleeding. In the year 301, he issued the edict on maximum prices, fixing the cost of more than 1,000 goods and services, from grain to wages. Anyone who violated the law faced death. But laws can't fix broken money. The edict failed almost immediately. Black markets exploded, legal trade collapsed, and people learned a harsh lesson. A decree can't make a worthless coin valuable again. Eventually, Rome gave up on the denarius altogether. Constantine the Great introduced a new gold coin, the solidus, around 312 after Christ. Unlike the denarius, it held consistent purity and restored some stability. The Eastern Roman Empire would rely on it for centuries. But for the West, the damage was already done. By the time the currency stabilized, Rome's economic core had been hollowed out. Armies could no longer be reliably paid. Trade networks were shattered. Trust, once lost, did not return. The fall of Rome wasn't a single moment. It was a long unraveling, and currency collapse was one of the sharpest threads pulling it apart. And that raises a question that refuses to stay buried in the past. If money helped destroy Rome, what does that say about the systems we trust today? So what does Rome's currency collapse really mean for us? It means something uncomfortable, something history keeps trying to tell us. The destruction of money is always the destruction of empires. Rome believed it could quietly extract value from its citizens by issuing coins that looked the same but were worth less. Modern governments believe they can do the same with paper money, digital balances, and endless debt. The method changes, the result never does. Rome learned this lesson the hard way, and history didn't stop teaching after Rome fell. Every major inflationary crisis since then has followed the same blueprint. Governments spend beyond their means. When taxes aren't enough, they debase the currency. Elites protect themselves with real assets, and ordinary people, those living paycheck to paycheck, those saving for the future, are left holding money that buys less and less. Rome's collapse wasn't unique. It was the first full-scale example. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the echoes are impossible to ignore. After World War I, Germany faced crushing reparations under the Treaty of Versailles. Instead of confronting the cost directly, the government chose the easier path. It printed money. Just like Rome striking cheaper coins, Germany believed it could paper over its obligations. By 1923, hyperinflation had taken hold. A loaf of bread that cost 1 mark before the war cost more than 200 billion marks just a few years later. Workers were paid twice a day because wages lost value by the hour. People carried their savings in wheelbarrows. Pensioners who had done everything right watched their life savings evaporate. Money became meaningless. And just like in ancient Rome, inflation didn't hurt everyone equally. Those with debts saw them wiped out. Those with real assets, land, factories, foreign currency, emerged stronger. The middle class was crushed, and the economic despair created fertile ground for political extremism. The collapse of money didn't just destroy wealth, it destabilized society and helped pave the way for Hitler's rise. Decades later, the same pattern played out again in Zimbabwe. In the early 2000s, facing land seizures, falling production, and mounting debt, the government turned to the printing press. By 2008, inflation reached an almost unimaginable level, nearly 90 billion% per year. Prices doubled daily. Shops couldn't update price tags fast enough. Eventually, the country abandoned its currency entirely. Citizens were forced to trade in US dollars or South African rand just to survive. Once again, the government tried to cheat reality. Once again, reality won. But you don't have to look only at extreme cases to see the Roman pattern at work. Even in modern, developed economies, the same forces are quietly operating beneath the surface. Consider the United States. In 1971, President Richard Nixon severed the last link between the dollar and gold. From that moment on, the dollar became a fiat currency, backed not by a tangible asset, but by trust in government. And just like Rome, once that anchor was gone, restraint became optional. Debt expanded. Money supply grew. Inflation became a constant presence rather than a rare emergency. While Americans haven't pushed wheelbarrows full of cash, purchasing power has steadily eroded. $1 in 1971 could buy what now takes more than $6 today. The bills look the same, the coins look the same. But the value inside them has been hollowed out. The trick is always the same. Governments frame inflation as growth. They celebrate rising wages without mentioning that costs are rising faster. They call debt investment even when it funds consumption. They point to soaring stock markets as proof of prosperity, even when most people own little or no stock at all. Like the Roman emperors before them, they insist nothing fundamental has changed, while quietly extracting value from every paycheck, every savings account, every pension. What makes this moment especially dangerous is scale. Rome's collapse was imperial, Weimar's was national, Zimbabwe was local. Today, nearly the entire world runs on fiat currencies, massive debt, and central banks willing to create trillions at the first sign of trouble. That means the next crisis won't be contained within borders. It will ripple globally, and if history is any guide, the people who suffer most won't be the elites holding assets. It will be the millions who depend on salaries, savings, and pensions denominated in increasingly fragile money. So what should you take away from Rome's currency collapse? First, understand that inflation isn't an accident, it's a policy. It's a silent tax that has broken empires for over 2,000 years. Second, recognize that real wealth isn't found in paper or numbers on a screen. It lives in things that hold value when money doesn't: land, skills, productive businesses, resources. Third, never assume stability is permanent. Romans in the first century would have laughed at the idea that their silver coins would one day be worthless. Germans in 1923 couldn't imagine wheelbarrows of cash. Zimbabweans in the 1980s believed independence guaranteed prosperity. In every case, confidence vanished slowly, then all at once. The fall of Rome reminds us that financial systems don't collapse overnight. They decay quietly as trust erodes. And when money stops being real, society begins to unravel. Contracts fail, trade breaks down, armies dissolve, governments lose legitimacy. The barbarians at the gate may finish the job, but the real killer is always inside the treasury. And here's the final truth. History doesn't repeat itself, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you just the same. Rome's currency crisis wasn't just about bad emperors or greedy elites. It was about the fragility of money when power abuses it, and that fragility has never gone away. If this changed the way you see the world, don't stop here. History has been sending the same warning for centuries. The only real question is whether we'll hear it this time.